For as beloved and as hype as the John Wick movie franchise is, it's crazy we don't have a good official game tie-in or anything. But what we do have going for us are other games drawing inspiration, or just good old action video games with fun action combat. So today on this video, we're talking about 10 games that will make you feel like you're John Wick. We got a bunch of games on this list. They're all pretty damn fun, but before we start, I just want to ask you to support my channel by liking and subscribing. Because, this is just a brand new channel, so I'm really hoping that you help me out here. Anyway, let's get into it. Starting off with number 10, it's Suit for Hire, a game that I just recently discovered. It's a top-down shooter and bizarrely, a pretty damn good approximation of the bluntly violent fighting style of the John Wick movies. For a little indie arcade shooter game, they capture the feel of those movies pretty well. It's quick, vicious, no nonsense. If you got a weapon, you use it, and they make sure to keep the action continuous by giving your character a pistol already set to go in one hand. So they're lunging into melee and shooting at the same time without missing a step. Yes, obviously it doesn't quite have the cinematography behind it, and it's a cartoonish game. It's nothing like the dark, almost mid-eye looks that you get with any of the John Wick stuff, but it does get the over-the-top headshot John Wickness pretty good.
Alright then. Stop!
Next over at number 9, we have SIFU. So while not overtly referencing John Wick, this martial arts brawler really gets a lot of things right. It's not a shooting game, but it is cinematic as hell, and it's got a little bit more of that style. Third-person brawlers are a start, but if you actually want to feel like you're in a movie, SIFU, this is the game to play.
Holy shit!
Every encounter looks so good, and while fights are intentionally challenging, the game did eventually introduce some difficulty options as well to make it easier to really feel like a badass. Just look at the way these fights play out. It looks like they pulled out something straight out of a John Wick movie. Every fight is a highly detailed animation. It's as if they took the philosophies from fighting games and applied them to a brawler. And obviously it's very challenging. People love to praise this game. It's one of our favorite games here on the channel. And while it's a little more hand-to-hand combat isn't necessarily John Wick the shooting man, this is a good alternative. I think it's worth pointing out alongside everything else here. And number 8 is Midnight Fight Express, and if SIFU hasn't sold you, then this might be the one. This is very clearly supposed to be John Wick, like the movie John Wick. The entire premise is that you go out and take down all the bad guys in one night, and you do this by going into an area, taking out all the enemies before you can move on and do it again. In comparison to SIFU, which is more methodical, Midnight Fight Express is all about speed and the resulting chaos, whether it's hand-to-hand melee or gunfights, something like the Warriors or Hotline Miami. You can keep the weapons, but using them up isn't a big deal. You just go on to the next thing, and the constant weapon switching gives the fights a lot of attention to it. It's almost like Hotline Miami in that regard, except it's a beat-em-up instead of a twin-stick shooter. There are extended gunplay sections in certain levels though, and that perfectly encapsulates the fun of the game. I don't see how you could play this game and not immediately get flashbacks of John Wick rampaging through the dance club or catching a sword to the face with his teeth. It's just like a game based on that idea. And number 7 is My Friend Pedro, another side-scrolling shooter where you cartwheel through trouble. And honestly, it feels more like you're channeling Wanted than John Wick. But as we all know, those movies don't actually make for good bullet-time action games. So the next logical place for the devs to go for inspiration/justification for constant over-the-top gunfights, John Wick. It's not the stealthiest, slowest, or even if I'm going to be frank, most wickiest game on the list, but it does feature some impressive gunplay. Not so much in terms of its strategical depth, but the kind of stuff you can do in this game is actually pretty amazing looking. Look at it. One moment you're diving through a window to headshot everybody in a room, and next you're blasting bikers violently off-road. Then you're jumping on a skateboard to take out the guys at the top with your machine guns. Yeah, it's the most unrealistic body-dropping extravaganza that still feels like John Wick in some way. It's not exactly one-to-one. Even the gunfights in John Wick have a degree of realism to them, whereas this game has lost it. Now moving on to number 6, we have Maximum Action, and another one that's kind of just completely on the nose. This is a first-person shooter that just revels in over-the-top movie-inspired violence. It's got slow motion, dual rear wielding, and kung fu, and lets you customize the action to look how you want with a variety of gameplay modifiers and weapons. You can go kind of a little crazier here with your weapons, ninja swords, explosive crossbows, or go full John Wick and stick with the guns and dual pistols and assault rifles. This is a simpler game. It's still technically an early access game on Steam, but it's just immediately satisfying. It's perfect for when you're in the mood to watch John Wick, or any other over-the-top action movie for that matter. It is one of the best ways to go full ham. Next up with number 5, it's probably not what you would expect, but the Deadeye mechanic in Red Dead Redemption 2 is spot on for a John Wick-style shootout. While these games manage to create surprisingly adaptive gameplay with the law, everyone after you kind of hounds you. Some movies like John Wick are kind of just the guy versus the world. We've been put into a very touchy situation, and we've had to dead-eye our way out of it, and man, it feels good! And by good, I mean like every single shot you make hits and generally kills somebody because we're doing headshots. Now, is it as smooth as John Wick's aim swapping, or whatever you want to call it, between head and torso? Who gives a shit? We're gamers. Every shot does not need to be a headshot. If we're wasting bullets, making it look accidental, I know they're all headshots. They all hit the head, but I'm training dozens of leftover bad guy henchmen goons to think that I miss sometimes, so they get confident and try to shoot back and I kill them all. It's a plan. Not a lack of aim or dead-eye skill. It's a plan. Moving on to number 4, it's Hitman 3. I mean, Hitman 3 is a slower game, it's more based around social stealth, and other than the ending of the game, it doesn't really go full John Wick except for the fact that John Wick and Agent 47 actually cross over anyways. So why not give you a chance to experience the world through a more family-friendly kind of lens? Now here's the thing, you're not going to find a lot of gun surgery in this game, and it is a more detective-type slow game, but I think that James Bond-style gameplay and stopping the bad guys as Agent 47, who, let's just admit it, they made him an action hero over the years. Even going full-on Gray Man action sequences where you're battling a tank where you're supposed to sneak around it. Now, obviously it's not exactly a carbon copy of John Wick, but that's not what we're trying to aim for here. It's more subtle, it's not like non-stop action, but when action happens, it is technically correct.
You hear me?
Moving on to number 3, we have Splinter Cell Conviction. See the concealed knife thing in the movie? That's a little more Splinter Cell. John Wick Chapter 4 has a lot more in common with Hitman actually, especially that end sequence, if you know what I mean. I don't know how it's not influenced by Hitman, but I digress. Anyway, the reason why I am kind of going off on these tangents is because the central entry here kind of requires a tangent. Splinter Cell Conviction is a very specific thing, and while the first Splinter Cell games kind of settled on some considerably less John Wick style stealth, I mean it's pretty much a stealth chores list where you're checking stuff off and doing the shoot and sneak during certain missions, but Conviction stays away from your standard Hitman or Solid Snake kind of storyline. And dare I say that the action, if you rip it out of the context of shooting stealth missions, is actually a lot more John Wick. I mean, it's technically correct with the fighting and shooting and killing and doing, right? Moving on to number 2, it's Wanted Dead. So you might have forgotten about this one. Came out in 2023 and didn't really make much of an impression, but it did have some pretty satisfying gun combat. It's a game similar to The Order 1886, a mix of guns you want to use and single-play story-style action that makes for a short runtime, but in theory, a great game. Now keep in mind, this is a developer that's not quite Naughty Dog. In fact, it's a new developer and has a relatively small team behind it. And the game is quite a bit glitchy, much harder than either of the games that it's kind of imitating or directly influenced by. That being said, the gunplay and knife stuff, very similar to John Wick. They are clearly trying to do something of an amalgamation between John Wick and the odd sensibilities of Japanese anime. And to be fair, they succeeded. It's just kind of an odd combo, even if combo is something that I could easily see some anime doing anyways. And finally, at number 1, it's almost unfair to call Watch Dogs Legion a John Wick game because, you know, when you hear that, you assume it's got something to do with the story. A game with freaky hackers with pig masks doesn't exactly sound super Keanu-ish. This is one where I just gotta ask you to trust me. Watch Dogs Legion features some of the slickest combat of any action game in years, and I do mean slick, not talking about just when you shoot, but how your character shoots. When you take down an enemy, you'll understand it. You can see it right away. There's some serious Wick-type combat going on in these animations. The team that made this thing are not just fans of the movies, they've carefully studied the choreography of the films to the point of obsession. You can take down enemies with machine precision in this game, and it just makes it really satisfying to play. Combined with parkour mechanics, the character's extraordinary mobility, you're in for a treat with Legion. Yeah, I mean, the world of this game is weirdly stupid, and there's a lot of stuff to criticize, but when it comes to combat, it's a rock-solid game, man. Of all the games we've talked about, we all see them with better combat, but not with a slicker combat like this one. And I do have a bonus for you, and it's Max Payne 3. Look, yeah, I don't know if this one is a stretch, but Max Payne, the iconic video game hero from the 2000s, did Gun Fu first. I mean, at least, well, ahead of the movies. At least in the original games, you could really slow down time and look super cool for long periods of time. The games used to be fun, but then in Max Payne 3, they make it look even cooler and more cinematic, and depending on who you ask, could actually be a better game. Yeah, sorry, I don't I don't know if you're just a classic Max Payne 1 and 2 person, and not the biggest Max Payne 3 person, but ignore that and think about the fact that, hey, at the end of the day, John Wick wouldn't exist without Max Payne. Well, maybe that's actually debatable and depending on who you ask, but still, this is the Gun Fu mold. So maybe it's worth a revisit if you want to look super cool. Also, if you want to actually make Max look like John Wick, don't worry, there is that mod out there. And there you have it, there's 11 games that have that awesome John Wick action-y feeling. There's a lot out there, and there's certainly some new ones on the horizon as well. But in the meantime, let us know what your best picks are. And if you enjoyed watching this video and want to see more, then please hit that like and subscribe button out there.